Hi, this is Sheila Stromberg, Notorious SHE. I am doing a tutorial today on how to do honeycomb brioche in the round, particularly for my next pattern. They're called Dwalin Armored Hand Warmers. I saw this stitch like years ago and I never knew what it was, and finally somebody told me what it was, so I just had to use it. I think it looks really like chainmail-y, so I think it's cool. These little hand warmers, they're kind of open on the bottom, fingers open, but they keep your back of your hand, your palm kind of warm, like if you're riding a bike or driving the car before the car heats up. Or, I mean, come on, they're just great for holding your axe. Somebody told me if you're a dwarf going into battle, you need to have grip on your axe. So anyways, I'm going to just show you how to get the work established. What we're going to be doing is this part of the pattern right here, where it's kind of looking like this. And that's just the honeycomb brioche. So this is a little bit different than some people work honeycomb brioche, which is why I'm doing a tutorial on it. So I'm going to just get started. So I already cast on the stitches on my larger size needles. And then I already worked the first round that is just purling. So you guys should be able to get through that part, obviously, without a tutorial. So I'm getting started on row number 2 after the cast on. So, okay, row 2 says to knit 1, so do that normally. And then the next stitch is to knit below. So knitting below is super easy. All you do is, instead of going into the regular stitch, we're going to go right into the loop right below it, exactly like it sounds. And so it shouldn't be, you're not going into the purl, you're going into the stitch, actually. And then you're going to yarn over and draw it through. And then you're going to drop off the stitch, and then this stitch that we just worked, it's going to drop down. Do you see how it's dropped down? So it's kind of like a drop stitch a little bit, but it's going to get stopped when it comes down to the stitch we did knit. So then we're going to do it again. Knit 1, knit 1 below. So again, not in the purl, right in the actual body of the stitch, right there. And then it'll drop down. Knit 1, knit 1 below. And then we just do that all the way to the end. Okay, so when you're like casting on for this, the stitch count is like tiny. And I know it looks way smaller than what you should be able to wear. Looks like it's for like a doll or something. Whoops. Make sure you don't split your yarn. Make sure you go through the actual stitch. Like that. But this stitch pattern I found, it is so stretchy that even though it looks like way smaller than you should be able to fit into, it'll stretch like crazy when you actually put it on. And don't lose track of what stitch you're on. Sorry when I get talking sometimes. There we go. So every other stitch should just be dropped below like we established it. Like that. Okay, so the last stitch should be a knit 1 below. Okay, now, so some of the stitches don't drop like naturally, so if that happens, you can pull on the work to make them drop down, or you can just do them when you get to them in the row. Okay, so row number 3, we're going to purl the first stitch. Okay, and then we're going to purl one with a slip. So this is a little tricky. Make sure your yarn is in the front of your work. I naturally stick it behind when I'm not doing anything, but make sure it stays in the front. So do you remember that we had this stitch that dropped down? That's the stitch that we're going to work with the live stitch. So this is the slip that it's talking about. So you can either put your needle through the slip, or you can put the slip up on the stitch and then just kind of purl them together like that. And then purl 1. So, okay, it's kind of hard to identify at first, like, is it this stitch or is it this one? And it's, if you're not sure, if you look behind, it's going to be this one that's hanging off. Or you can see it between the 2 stitches. It's this big loose loop. It'll look kind of like a horseshoe shape around the current stitch. And then you just purl them together. After you get good at it, you can just stick your needle through and stick it through that one. Oops. And then purl them together. And you don't have to put it up on the needle. I mean, you can. It doesn't hurt anything by putting it up on the needle. Just, it's a little faster the other way. So you just all the way around, purling them together. Okay, and I think a variegated yarn is good for this because you can kind of see the stitch that you dropped a little easier. Well, they call it slipping it in brioche, but to me it looks like a drop stitch. Okay, so then number 4, we're going to do the exact same stitch pattern, knit one below, and then purling them together, but we're just staggering which stitch we did it on. So we did it before on the second stitch, now we're going to do it on the first stitch. So we're going to, the knitting below, remember, is through this center of the stitch, not here. So it's down here, and then that'll cause your stitch to drop off like that. So we do that all the way around, just like we did before. Oops. And I'm doing this on double point needles, but you can do it obviously on a circular needle or with a magic loop, whatever you prefer. So at first when you're working this stitch pattern, it looks like totally a mess. It does not look like at all what it should look like, but it'll get there. It just takes a couple rows before it starts looking like it's supposed to. Okay, and then row 5, we're going to do the exact same purling one with the slip. So let's see. So the slip is actually this brown one here. Stick it up there. And again, if you're not sure, you can always just look at the back of the work and it'll be the top one here, if you can see. There'll be 2 little stitches behind there. Just make sure you grab the top one. And we just go all the way to the end. It's pretty, it gets, you know, pretty easy to memorize really quickly because it's just the same thing, just staggered. Okay, so after you've finished round 5, it's gonna start looking like how it's supposed to down here. And the further you work it, obviously, the more you'll be able to see the stitch pattern. And then at row 5, try it on, and it should fit on your wrist at this point. It's a lot easier to try on a circular needle, but you can try it on double point needles, and it should be able to. Do you see how much like stretchier it is? And it seems like it should be. It's really, really stretchy. So it should fit comfortably over your wrist. If not, then you might want to bump up a size before you've gotten very far into the work. Okay, that is the stitch pattern, and everything else is just building on these principles, so you should be okay. But if not, you can always send me a message. Okay, thanks. Good luck.